So the font is larger, so there's a... Thank you. I'd like to thank the organizers also, and when Goran Đorđević invited me, I thought, well, this is a very diverse audience from different parts of physics, and maybe this is a good topic because every one of us makes contact with path integrals in some aspect. Path integrals, this wonderful thing that Feynman brought up 50 years or a little bit more, are wonderful to manipulate things, to manipulate theories. They were great for generalizing the quantization procedure from point particles to field theories to strings, membranes, blah, blah, blah. The problem is they're great for dealing with symmetries, particularly gauge symmetries. They're good for finding connections between different sectors of different theories like bosonization and duality. But if you want to really calculate the path integrals, you find that the number of things you can do exactly is extremely small. Free theory, basically. Okay? So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the problem that we have with path integrals in a parallel with the problem that people had about 300 years ago with ordinary integrals. And there, they first of all had a definition of what an integral was, and then for several decades they calculated things using that definition from the Darboux sums directly. And then came Euler. And Euler brought about something that was called the Euler summation formula. And everybody has remembered this. It's the connection between an integral and its discretizations. And this was the thing that charged mathematicians to make the next step, or Riemann and Lebesgue, whatever, to make the next step to a theory of integration. And nobody normal in his life ever calculates integrals anymore through the definition, right? But through manipulating the properties. Well, so now we have an Euler summation formula for path integrals. I'd like to tell you about. The outcome so far is that we have 100 million times faster algorithm to calculate, general algorithm. So that's a nice number. So let's start with ordinary integrals. It's a definition of a limit, some discrete sum of this type. And epsilon n is just the time step, and Tn is discrete coordinate. And this is very bad for brute force calculations, because really the difference between what you're calculating, if you do the sum, and what you want to calculate, the limit, is 1 over n, and that's a relatively slowly falling off function. So, to do it before Euler, you had to do things this way. You had to find a useful discretization, and that took a lot of ingenuity. You had to do a general n-fold sum, and then you had to do the continuum limit. And if you couldn't do all three of these steps, you couldn't do the integrals. So obviously, you could only do a few very simple things. Euler's summation formula allowed you to speed up the convergence of the discrete things that you're calculating arbitrarily, depending on how many terms in the Euler sum formula you want to keep. And it wasn't much use numerically, because there weren't computers in the 18th century, which was a lucky thing. Or maybe the theory of integration would come a little bit later, because people would have done things brute force. Anyway, the real beauty of Euler's summation formula is that it pointed to an underlying symmetry of integrals in general, and that's what allowed people to set up the theory of integration. So let's derive Euler's formula in a way to generalize the path integrals very easily. First of all, the idea is a little bit different than the way Euler did it. Discretization is not unique. So for infinitely many functions, we discretize to the same continuum limit. So if f of t is what you want to integrate, think of an equivalent function f star, which depends on the discretization step epsilon also. And it has to go over to f of t to have the same continuum limit, in the same integral. But we're going to ask for a further property, that all of the sums of f star give the exact result, independent of what n is. I'll give you a way of constructing f star for any f. So step 1 is take f of t equals to 1. And then if you integrate that, well, you get t, which doesn't depend on n, so you already get the integral. So you don't have to fix it. That means that the difference between the fixed and the first function is something that depends on something that is 0 when f is a constant function. So it has to be the derivatives. Step 2, take f of t equals t. Then you do the sums, and the sums are an independent, discretization independent, the integral, and the 1 over n term. Well, you can turn this into a redefinition of what you're putting under the integral sum. And this term at the level of functions is that f star is now f minus this term here, plus things that depend on the second, third, and so on derivatives. Well, this is easily continued in step 3, and let's stop here, and you get that f star is up to this order this. Okay? So that's simplicity itself. What we have derived is the Euler formula. In a different way than Euler did it, but it's the same thing. So the integral of f of t is a discrete sum of something which we call f star, but this is f, which is the naive discretization of the integral, plus counter terms, if you want to call them that, depending on the first, second, and so on derivatives. And if you really want to be nice, these are really Bernoulli numbers, blah, blah, blah. Symmetry factors can be found. Okay? But really, what we have is this. The integral of f, any function f, is the discrete sum of some function f p, which is determined in this way. Take the Euler formula, take the first p terms of the Euler formula, and that's f of p. And the difference between these two guys is 1 over n to the p. So if you want to take first 10 terms, then you have 1 over n to the 10th, which is a lot better than 1 over n. Had there been computers, they would have been really happy with Euler. But in fact, he was even more useful analytically, and I hope to show you that the same is true for integrals as well. So now let's remind ourselves what Feynman taught us. The general amplitude, I'm going to work in quantum mechanics in one dimension. Okay? So the general transition amplitude from A to B for a time t, I'm also in the Euclidean form. The discretized sum will be an, so it's this n minus 1-fold integral expression, an action s. Let's say an action in this form, for an arbitrary b. And you need to take the n to infinity, the continuum limit of this guy. That's what you want to calculate. Alright. The first thing is to discretize this guy. The naive discretization will be this. Delta n is just this kind of difference. V is calculated in the midpoint prescription. In high-energy theory, this is kind of things that we usually do. The solid state guys like to use a different prescription, the left prescription, but this is better. Though there it has an advantage too, I won't talk about that. So this is the midpoint in between this one.
What's the advantage?
The advantage is that theirs works much faster at the naive level. But this one is much better because they don't care about things like ordering prescriptions. See, for an action like this type, where you don't have a PQ term, any prescription is nice. But in high energy physics, we like to do things like with having a G here, like a sigma model thing. And then it's very important to use something that is inherently Hermitian. So this is symmetric, it's Hermitian. It's Weil ordering in the operator forms. So it's better. But in fact, in this thing that we're going to do, we're going to compare discretizations. And it turns out that the equations are much easier when you go down in this way. If you keep all of the symmetries, it's better in the long run. Keeping hermeticity is very important. Anyway, for them they couldn't care less. But they'll care now because this is much, much faster. Alright, so I'm going to look at actions of this type. But the general theory of this type. So the idea from our introduction is to consider not the naive discretization, but some other guy, I'll call it S star, which has the same kinetic term, but has some effective potential like term here, that's equivalent to the starting theory. That means W is V plus epsilon corrections, but has the added property that any discretized sum using this guy gives automatically, without any limit, the exact results. And just as before, I'm not going to prove that this can be done, I'm going to construct the guy. First of all, before we do that, let's look at some general properties of this without looking at the details of other theories. First of all, any amplitude can be written in this form. This is what you would have if there were no potential, and this is the rest. Let's call it a reduced amplitude. This goes to 1 as epsilon goes to 0, because you know that if you have short time propagation, everything is diffusion. So you have a pure diffusion process. This is diffusion. delta squared is proportional to epsilon. That's random walk. Okay? So anyway, you also know that any theory satisfies this kind of condition for any n. This is just the effect of linearity of quantum states. So from this and the definition of what A is, it's easy to read off that W star, what we need for this effective action S star, is actually this reduced amplitude.
I forgot what's W star.
W star is the effective potential. Okay? So I'm going to change the potential for something which is W star with the idea that I want to construct something that automatically gives me the continuum limit without doing it. And this is nice. So, well, this is nothing new. If I know how to do the theory, then I know this, and then I'll know how to make an action. This is just like showing that it exists. But I'd like to calculate W star without having done. What you can read off, however, from this is the general property of what W star depends on. W star being an effective potential, you would expect it to depend on Q bar, okay, the midpoint. But in fact, from this you see that it depends on n plus 1 n also. So Q bar is only the combination, the symmetric combination. It also has to depend on another variable, the anti-symmetric combination, which we call delta, which is the velocity, Qn plus 1 minus Q. So we know that W star has this general form. It depends on Q dot, if you want, Q, and the time step. Nothing more. The next thing we have is, again, a very general thing. In the Euclidean formalism, amplitudes are real. The analog of hermeticity in the Minkowski formalism. And from this you find that the amplitude from A to B for time t is just the same as the amplitude from B to A for time t. Well, translated for W, that just means that W is even in the deltas. That's trivial to show. So said another way, I can write the general function W star in expanding in deltas as some G0 plus delta squared G1 plus delta fourth G2, etc. It's an expansion in even powers of velocities. And all of these GKs are regular in the continuum limit. They don't blow up. And G0 goes to V. That's the connection to my initial theory. That makes it equivalent. That's as far as we can go without doing anything. Now, what we want to do is, since by construction this W star should give the same answer for any n, then I should compare the discretizations, and they should give the exact answer. And if they do, I'll construct W star in this way. So look at the discretization with 2n time steps. We're going from time 0 to time t in 2n time steps, and this is a typical trajectory that we're summing over. And we're going to relate that to this, which is 2 times coarser discretization, n steps. All right? How do we do that? Well, that's very easy in principle. You write the 2 amplitudes and evaluate, equate them. So the connection is very easily seen like this. Imagine that you're calling the 2n coordinates capital Q, and every other one you're going to call a little q, and the in-between points you're going to call x. So this is what you integrate over on an n-point amplitude. This is what you integrate over on a 2n amplitude. And these are the guys you have to do the intermediate integrals over. All right? So what you're left with is this. So if you have a 2n-fold discretization of your theory, this is S2n, then if you could do this, you would get an Sn tilde, which is just as good as as this theory, but it's used for an n-fold integration, because you've already done half of the points. And of course you'll say, well, that's very nice, but this is just a starting problem. I have to do a path integral, a general path integral. That's true. So, we have in principle a way of making an n-fold amplitude that is done with S tilde, give exactly the same result as a 2n-fold amplitude with the starting S. If only we could actually do the integrals. Now really the biggest problem is that even if we do that, this is just having the coarseness. We would like to do that lots of times. We'd like to iterate this process. Okay? And the problem really, the capital problem is this. If you give me S And I can do that integral. S tilde is of a different form than S. So even if I could do this machine once, to iterate it, I get a harder and harder problem. And the solution is easy. Star is something that gives the same answer no matter what end you use by construction. So put it on both sides. And then you get an equation for S star. And the equation is a simple one, and it takes like 2 steps of trivial manipulation to get to this point. So W star is equal to some very simple one-dimensional integral, ordinary integral, no path integral, of an exponential quantity and, well, this. This is some relative, this is e to the minus w, but evaluated at different points. But it's written in this way because this is something that's very, very, very easily solved. So, just to make you look at this equation easier, it is complex, but really this is just some function of w star, and this is w star. So it closes on itself. Now, this is easily solved for the cases where you can do the integrals that you know how to do. So, for instance, for the free theory, it's trivially solved. For the harmonic oscillator, it's not as trivial, but you can do it exactly. So it's a hard-looking integral equation. But one thing that's easy is that it's written in a form that is nice for us. It's written in a form that's ideal for asymptotic expansion. It's e to the something large times y squared times something else. This does depend on epsilon, but it's regular on epsilon. So this is the kind of guide we do 10 times daily when we derive loop expansions, for instance. Same kind of integrals, not this. Here we're comparing discretizations. This is very easy to do. So the trick to do this is just to expand this guy with Taylor expansion, and then you're always going to have Gaussian integrals, and it gives you an expansion in the large parameters. So an asymptotic expansion in the large parameter, which is 1 over epsilon. Or equivalently, an expansion in epsilon, where epsilon is small. So this is the answer. This is the exact answer. Unfortunately, you have to now do the algebra. So you have to look at what f was, do all of these derivatives, evaluate them, shift them so that they are centered at this qn bar. And it's very easy conceptually, but to calculate it if you want a very large precision is a lot of work. So by hand you can do it like the first 3 orders in epsilon. But there's things like Mathematica, and if you use that, it's just an algebraic calculation. We've done it to 9 orders of magnitude. Which means that for a general theory, we have calculated W star, or if you want, the effective action that gives you the exact results immediately, up to 9 orders in epsilon expansion, up to epsilon to the 9. Now, what does this translate into? I'll show you the result for p equals 3 because they tend to get a little bit ugly with larger, because the functions are just bigger, but they're just as easy to work with for computers. But the p equals 3 solution looks something like this. So, on the left-hand side we have W star, on the right-hand side we have W star at a different point, or alternately with the g 0, 1, and 2 functions, it looks like this. And this looks like a system that is very, very difficult to solve. It compares things at epsilon discretization with things at epsilon half. But actually, it's very simple because, in fact, even these functions you can expand in epsilon, and then you have a linear system. And I won't get into details, you can do that on paper. But the answer is very, very simple. So, if you want to use your starting action, that's very nice, but the price is that your error is 1 over m. Instead of using that, I say, do the same thing, but don't use v. Use this guy times the velocity squared plus the velocity squared times this guy plus the velocity fourth times this guy, and you'll get an answer that is 1 over n to the cube, because I'm giving you the p equals 3. And if you want to use the p equals 9, the expression is a bit bigger, but computers don't really care. And it works, and you get 1 over n to the 9 for any potential. So really what we derive is precisely what Euler had. We have a way of constructing, calculating a general path integral by relating it to a discretization with n time steps. And if you want to achieve an error, which is 1 over n to the p, that just means that you have to put in here what I called the p level of this recursive relation. After p equals 9, the requirements for memory, for the computer to do the algebra, go beyond what we have. Not good time. Okay, I'll just flash just a few things to show you. We did some numerical calculations to show that it works for lots of models. Look at this. This is how things converge usually. This is the first iterate. Just make it just goes like this. If you do it with 9 iterates, it's like you get 5 or 6 decimal places correctly without doing any integrals at all. Now this is for fourth theory, but in a very non-perturbative regime. So that's interesting. It works anywhere. This is modified Poschel-Teller. You know, we looked at all of those old quantum textbooks. What are the potentials where we know how to do things exactly to compare? And again, it doesn't matter. All over the space of parameters, it converges fast. And this is, I'll stop here because this is the really killer. If you want to use the action, then things go as 1 over n. This is a log-log scale. So this is the error of doing discrete path integrals. This is 1 over n. And this guy is 1 over n to the 6th. This is doing with our level p equals 6. With p equals 9, we couldn't do it even on a supercomputer because it would take a lot of time. The Monte Carlo error is bigger than the errors associated here. So let's put it this way. Without doing any integrals, I can give you 8 orders of magnitude exactly, just by using a different integral for a general theory. So on this PR punchline, maybe this is where we should stop. The point here is that it's useful for numerical calculations, but really we are from a different field. We're interested in the analytical results coming out of this. One analytical results coming out of this that I won't talk about here, maybe we can discuss later, are some new analytical approximations that work for general path integrals. And another thing is our hope that the fact that path integrals have this simplicity behind them, really, is maybe an outline that there does exist a theory, a bona fide theory of path integration, like Riemann integrals, that in maybe a few years we'll be able to do table path integrals. So at this point we have an increase of 8 orders of magnitude in the speed of calculation of anything. So guys doing QCD might like to line up.
Just logically, what is related to Monte Carlo?
Monte Carlo here was only to work on some models and see that the speed up that we derived analytically really works. So Monte Carlo is not in the derivation, but in just showing that something works 100 million times faster.
Yeah, but what is better, Monte Carlo or this method?
Aha, well really you want to combine. Monte Carlo is nice, but even Monte Carlo you need to use large values of n, large numbers of discretizations, and that costs a lot of time. So if I can give you an analytic procedure that says don't do 10,000 integrals, but do 2, or 3, that is a huge speed up. So if you combine the two things, you can get a lot. But also, for some theories, and this is really very interesting, even the thing without any integration, if you do this procedure, gives you 5 or 6 decimal places exact result. So it's a wonderful new analytical tool, but it needs to be investigated. All of this is in d equals 1. We're extending this to field theory. It will work. It might not give such a speed up, 10 to the 9, because it's a little bit more complex there, but the thing is essentially an asymptotic expansion. So the idea is always, when you do numerics, input as much analytical knowledge as you can. Then do numerics if you have to.
And do you have some formulas for field theory?
We have worked on field theory. We know how to do the whole thing, but we have not completed the procedure. So really, I'll tell you this: everything can be done, but the recursive relation you need to solve is bigger. Ultimately, it's solvable because it's linear, but we have to do it. We work a lot on d equal 2, and then we go to normal relations.
Can you compare the results with perturbative expansion?
Yes, this we have not even compared to perturbative, we have compared to exact, computed numerically. But of course, perturbative is very nice. So when you're in a perturbative regime, of course, perturbative results were very, very nice. This method, of course, yes, but this method extends away from the perturbative island, you know? The nice thing is that looking at how discretizations compare really tells you about everything, not just the perturbative sector. So it's an extension. It's very, very useful.